Let's start from the beginning.
My inherited economy is on the brink. Now our economy is literally the envy of the world.
I want to bring in E.J. Antoni, Heritage Foundation research fellow and economist. E.J., talk to me about the data this morning. A healthy normalization or an extreme slowdown of this labor market?
Oh, Taylor, I think anemic is the only word you can use to describe the support. Not only did we see another round of huge downward revisions, that means that basically half of the job growth in this report were jobs we literally thought we already had. But on top of that, look at July's number. It's now under 90,000 in terms of jobs added after those revisions. So things are definitely slowing down, and much slower than you could possibly consider to be a healthy labor market. Those folks touting the manufacturing numbers aren't even including another 100,000 jobs, which still have to be subtracted. We already got that info out of the annual benchmark revision, so we know that downward revision is coming. It just hasn't actually been put into the numbers yet. So manufacturing is clearly down. That sector is clearly in recession itself, whether you look at the purchasing manager indexes or you look at the surveys from the different regional Federal Reserve banks. That sector has been declining literally for 2 years now. In terms of the broader economy, though, I think there's a very strong likelihood we're eventually going to backdate a recession to right around this time.
One of the pieces that's really disturbing is part-time jobs and full-time jobs. If you look at this past month, the net jobs, all of the net jobs were part-time jobs, EJ. What does that mean for the consumer?
Well, Brian, unfortunately, it means the consumer is going to continue to be extremely strapped going forward because they are losing their full-time jobs and having to replace them with at least one, but typically more than one, part-time jobs. And sadly, this last month is not simply an isolated incident. It's part of a broader, longer trend where we have been losing these full-time jobs, over 1 million in the last year, and replacing them entirely with part-time ones. So again, it's not a good sign. And by the way, it's also a very common practice for businesses to do this, to shift away from full-time employment and towards part-time employment as we head into a recession.
Right.
So what do you expect to hear tonight on the economy? It still ranks as the #1 issue in poll after poll for American voters.
And it should be. Inflation and affordability are really important to people, and they vote on that. We know that from history. So I think it was good that she put out a plan. It's right at the last minute. She met the deadline. It talks about, but what troubled me is as they put in the headlines for the plan, it doesn't give you the full concept of the details. Like it says a tax cut for middle class, but really what she's doing is extending the Trump tax plan for the middle class, which is set to expire. So it's not really a new one. She puts in a bunch of credits, but anytime you hear a tax credit, you should realize this is a new spending program. So they're doing it in various areas, in housing, to try to make it more equitable, but that ends up fouling up the way the market actually works. So if you think about, if what you want is more housing within the country, you don't want to have the government coming to help. You know the words, if I'm from the government, I'm here to help. That is what speaks through the plan. On energy policy, she says that she'll get energy prices down, but when you look at the details, all of them point to higher energy prices. So again, I'm here from the government, here to help, and it's not going to work. And so that what was lost is all that additional U.S. production that could have been out there helping the world. And you see that in world prices. The people in poorer countries are suffering massively from the shortfall of U.S. energy production over these recent years. The U.S. isn't exporting because they blocked it. The permitting has not been done. And so this is the kind of doublespeak in the plan. They put on a good headline, but then the details aren't really going to achieve that. And we have to remember, Harrison Walz neither has really worked in the private sector. So it's a government takeover of the private sector.
Welcome back to Squawk Box. Rick Santelli here live at CME HQ with the important breaking news of the morning. Our August read on Consumer Price Index, the last look at this series of data points going into next week's obvious big FOMC meeting. CPI month over month headline up 0.2, exactly as expected. up 0.3 when you strip out food and energy. That's 1/10 hotter than we were expecting, and that equals April. To find a higher, you have to go to March when it was up 0.4. If you look at the year-over-year numbers in the rearview mirror, 2.9. That now becomes 2.5. 2.5 is the smallest amount going back to February of 2021. And if you look at year-over-year ex food and energy, 3.2, exactly as expected, and exactly the same as the rear view mirror. And what we want to definitely pay very, very close attention to here are the indices. CPI index going all the way back to 1913 actually moved down just a smidge from 3.1454 to 3.1479. That's higher, but it's lower than expectations. And once again, that is the highest level since 1913. And if you look at the core indice, which only goes back to 1957, it also came in more than expected and more than our last look at 319.76. It has never been higher. We see that yields are moving up. And my guess is, if you look at expectations, we could see that there was one outlier there, and that was the core month or month, the 10th hotter. If you look at the sequential aspects of this, of course, we see that the 2.5 year-over-year headline dropped 0.4. But once again, we could talk about all the significant progress we've made on inflation, but it's still not at 2%. Will it ever be at 2%? Does it matter? Well, it mattered when it was at 1.8, and the Fed wouldn't look at that as just steady pricing. It was below the target. We'll have to see how it all works out. We do see that the closes yesterday in twos were significant. That was a 2-year low yield close. In tens, it was a 15.5-month low yield close. And everybody's talking about the debate. I was a bit disappointed having kids and grandkids who can't afford houses and, of course, can't afford insurance once you buy them, or some of the other prices. It seemed like there was really an economic tone-deaf panel with respect to drilling down. If you give people $50,000 to buy their house, I think it sounds like a good idea. But, I think CPI numbers might reflect that. Price of homes might go up about, what, $50,000?